I forget what people's titles are, even though we all work together. It's like, I don't think about it that much.
You can call me Ultimate Type Queen. It's fine.
Yeah, that's what I think of you as. Queen shit only, right, Marie?
Always.
Monotype. Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, a show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm your host, Bill, and I'm excited to be here today with Cadley. Cadley, how's it going?
Hey, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing so well, and I'm really excited for today's episode, one that I know you've been working really hard on. Today, we're providing a peek behind the curtain of the research we do here at Monotype on the emotional impact of typography, right? So do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what they can expect from today's episode?
I'm hosting Marie Boulanger, who is a senior brand designer at Monotype. It's her first time as a guest on the podcast, and she is also leading our Typography Matters research. This is research we've been working on for 2 years now. We've been exploring the emotional resonance of type in 8 different countries. And then I also gathered some fun stories and anecdotes from the creative community in Chicago a few weeks ago. So just kind of got a chance to ask them about fonts and feelings, which is a topic that is near and dear to our hearts at Monotype.
It's been really fun as a relative outsider to the research process to just see how it's evolved over the past couple of years, as you said, into different countries and regions, but also just to hear both the science and the more quantitative metrics behind fonts and feelings, as well as the anecdotes, as well as the personal stories of how designers feel about fonts. And that's what I think this episode is really going to provide to listeners. I think it's a really fun one, and I'm glad that the team has put it together. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Cadley, and to Marie, and to the wonderful creative community for today's episode of Creative Characters.
Okay, so today I have Marie Boulanger, who is senior brand designer at Monotype.
That's right.
Am I quoting your title correctly?
You are.
I should know.
And I also never get tired of people saying my name. It's so good.
It's good for me to practice my French. But yeah, so Marie has been leading, I would say, this Typography Matters research for a couple years now, along with some other folks at Monotype. So wanted to bring her on to learn a little bit more about what's been going on. And this research will actually be publishing in the form of 2 different ebooks in the coming weeks. It really consolidates all of the data that we have from 8 different countries. And at Adobe Max, a lot of what we're going to be doing this year also ties into the Typography Matters research. So excited to see your face in person next week at Adobe Max in Los Angeles.
Oh my God, me too. I am thrilled beyond words to be in LA with you at Max. It's going to be a blast.
It is, yes. I know you've been working really hard on like the booth and the activations, and we have a speaking session. So there's a lot going on, and we're excited to see some of you there as well.
Yes, people get excited. There's a lot happening this year.
Today, I would like to start with kind of an interesting question, which you inspired. Tell me about a time that you've had, or maybe the first time you had an emotional reaction to type.
Yeah, of course. I always loved writing. As soon as I learned, it was just something that I was really drawn to. And I really hope that this doesn't give serial killer vibes, but I've actually been drawing alphabets as almost as a self-soothing tool since I was a kid, like since I was 5, 6 years old and I learned to write. And as soon as I learned about alphabets, and especially in the French schooling system, cursive is very important. Like all of, the amazing capitals and letters, they're just really beautiful. So there's a lot of emphasis put on practicing calligraphy and writing with your hands. Also, I was left-handed, so I sucked for a really long time. And it was just something that I did to, get better at writing. And I don't know, alphabets just fascinated me. So I guess you could say it goes way back. And I guess it also explains why I'm here.
A type designer was embedded in you as a young child. It's funny because when I was little, I got really obsessed with like making greeting cards for people and drawing bubble letters. And that was like, I was obsessed. And I'm sure it was nothing like the French cursive you were writing. But yeah, I still do it sometimes for my family.
Oh my God. Were you like the classroom queen was everyone asking like, can you do bubble letters for me?
Yeah. So true. Oh my gosh.
I love that.
Oh, to be young. To kind of go into why we're talking about this a little bit, why we're talking about fonts and feelings and childhood, I wanted to start, Marie, by asking about our research into the emotional impact of type and what we've been doing at Monotype for a little while now.
Yeah. So maybe this is entirely new if you're just tuning in recently or you've just discovered our podcast or the Monotype brand, but this is a subject that we've been exploring for a couple of years now. And we are trying to basically measure the emotional impact of typefaces through different tests and ways of figuring that out, because even the figuring out part is very complex. How do you measure that? How do you construct tests that have meaning and are valuable to people? Yeah, we have a couple of years under our belt now. We did a really nice activation also at Max last year where we did crazy things looking at people's brains when they were looking at different typefaces. So you could say that we're finding our groove.
And I feel like with the research, as we continue to push on, we just keep uncovering like challenges and questions and things that might have shaken our hypotheses. So it's really interesting seeing how it shapes and evolves, especially now that we've done it in 8 different countries, I think, total, right?
Yeah, that's right. 8 countries and counting.
So could you tell me a little bit how the research works, like a little bit about the methodology?
It's all online testing. So no hardware, not a lab setting, nothing like that. Just showing people stimuli or imagery on screens, usually on phones. And then the way that the answers are collected or the reactions are measured is through a self-assessment. So people look at images and then they are given a set of questions relating to their emotional response or their motivational response, and they have to rate themselves.
And the stimuli, can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like?
So the main stimuli that we've been using throughout this whole project is single words in several different typefaces. The main ones that we have been using for the purposes of these tests are quality, trust, and innovation. Those words are brand values because we are really connected to the branding world. And I guess it's one of the contexts where people are really interested in the ROI of type. You're a big brand, you want a new typeface, and you say, hey, I want my typeface to express this, or I want my typeface to resonate in this market. So the whole branding aspect really makes sense.
And for the typefaces that we've been testing, how did we go about choosing which fonts to use?
Oh, this was fun. This is something that we had to create from scratch, and even our research partner, a company called Neurons in Copenhagen, they're not type experts, but they are testing experts. So they advised us to pick very different typefaces to see if we could get, wildly different reactions out of people. And also to almost craft a stereotypical typeface association, which is exactly what we did. So we had these values in mind that we knew we wanted to test. We knew that the format would be kind of very short stimuli, probably single words. And then all we had to do was kind of add a typeface in the mix. So we paired up kind of stereotypical typefaces for each emotion, each value. Phil Garnham from the studio was a huge help in selecting the typefaces. When we worked on different scripts, we also had to get help in, Japanese. How do you pick Japanese typefaces, making sure that they're aligned with the values, etc. So it was a lot of work trying to select that set of typefaces for testing.
Sounds like a lot of work. And Marie, remind me, what was the end goal of this study? Who's Monotype trying to help with all of this information?
Either somebody who's on the creative side of branding or somebody who's on the decision side of branding, maybe a marketer, maybe, a CMO. People are really interested in the ROI of type. You're a big brand, you want a new typeface, and you say, hey, I want my typeface to express this, or I want my typeface to resonate in this market. So the whole branding aspect really makes sense. That's who we're trying to help.
So do you want to get a little bit into some of the findings? What has come out of this so far? What have we learned?
Oh, God. So much. The one thing that really sticks out for me after doing all of this testing in all of these countries is how culture specific it is. And it's something that I personally was really expecting, and it didn't come as a surprise. I actually studied linguistics before studying type design, so I was really interested in the kind of socio-linguistic aspect of type and how the message associates with the typeface. But it's also something that has come out a lot in conversations with clients, people who come for, let's say, really big rebrands and say, I want this typeface to have an impact in the UK and in China, is this the right approach? Like that happens all the time and it's very close to the conversations that we have in the studio. And then the second thing that has also really stuck out to me is how big the impact is, regardless of location. Because I was not worried, it's not the right word, but I was thinking that maybe, you know, depending on where it's tested, some countries might have a really low reaction to type or might not care as much. That has not been the case at all. We've seen differences, but we haven't really seen very low results or results that might make us think that the thinking behind this is flawed or anything like that. There's a consistently high result rate and I want to say a high level of care for type because clearly it affects people. So that's the two main things.
I feel like even just when we started this research, I think overwhelmingly one of the things that people were asking for during the webinar was like this exploration into new countries and new languages. So I also think from a crowdsourcing perspective, like we're giving the people what they want.
Absolutely. And we wanted this to be useful. So we actually paid a lot of attention to all of the questions that people had and people's feedback, because this is something that we are doing and making available for the community, for the industry. It's really how it's been planned.
So I was at Brand Talks Chicago last week and at Brand New Conference, and I had an opportunity for the first time to kind of like pressure test some of this research that we've been doing and get some qualitative insights just out in the world from designers and creatives, which was really nice. And most importantly, I use this as an opportunity to ask people about their emotional relation with type, one of my favorite topics. That's why we're talking about it today. I talked to a mix of like designers, art directors, creative directors, I think even a creative producer, and wasn't really sure how it was going to go because I wasn't sure if it was like a natural thing for most people to think about. And I was kind of stunned that everyone had an answer like right away, which I thought was really just proving this power of the value of type. And I spoke to this woman, Julie Young, who is a creative producer at Home Chef. And she shared this really, really nice story about when she was in college. And she bought her roommate this gift that kind of just like tied their worlds together so beautifully. And it was really personal.
Yeah, so actually my college roommate was a VCD, visual communication design major. I was a fashion major. So we had a little bit of overlap in the art school. And we lived together for the first 2 years of college. And so for her 21st birthday, she was obsessed with font. I was always seeing she was like making custom fonts and would show me in our little dorm room. And I found a old printer press typeface that you could buy a single letter and put it on a necklace. And it was this really beautiful serif S that I got for her first initial and gave it to her as a birthday gift. And I just remember feeling like it connected both of our worlds so beautifully between fashion and design, and she recognized the typeface when she saw it, so it was emotional for both of us to have that experience.
Aw, that's so lovely. That's such a nice story. God, I wonder what she would think of me and all the type stuff in my house. She would freak out.
Oh, she'd probably appreciate it. I used to have like tea towels from Monotype that have type on them hanging in my apartment, and all my friends would come over and be like, what are those? Like, why do you have that?
They're amazing. You know, all of my Monotype merch that I got as my new starter pack, I gave it all as stocking fillers for Christmas to my entire family. They loved it.
Who doesn't love fonts?
Okay, this is so embarrassing and I'm going to out myself as an actual freak, but I have filters on Depop and Vinted and eBay for like lettering clothes or like letter pattern or alphabet print. So there you go. I'm confessing my sins.
You're not a freak. I'm stealing that idea now.
Wait till you see my outfit for Max, just saying.
I can't wait to see your outfit. You know, I'm always excited for some show and tell. It was really interesting to see where this question took people. So I think designers like immediately referred to a project they had worked on where they were trying to make type fit specific emotions, whereas other people recalled really personal stories. I also spoke with James Somerville, who is the co-founder of Known Unknown during Brand Talks Chicago. And James talked about how type and written communication have impacted him since a young age. Can you tell me about a time you remember having an emotional response to type?
It was probably my really crappy scores at school, or some teacher who'd written to my parents. So I guess in a very early stage, I realized that the power of written communication, typography, way before social media, way before even, we all had telephones. But I learned to love type. I learned to see type as a way to make friends and sell product and communicate and tell stories. And something we've all loved since we were babies is that storytelling, which usually involves a beautifully colourful image and a story. So those are my earliest childhood memories, maybe, of typography.
There's a lot of depth in what he had to say, I think, and how, it really goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, the cultural element of type and the personal as well, which I think is something that is super important. And obviously the tie to the message as well that's behind the typeface. This is actually a line that I use in a lot of my talks when I speak to students or at universities. I always say that type is such a weird material because it's never pure. It's not like color. You can't just have type like you can just have color. You always have words and meaning behind it. And I feel like you can really see that come through in people's answers.
You actually just did a great job of leading into another anecdote that I collected from one of our speakers at Brand Talks, LaShawn Tynes, who is a design director at Wieden & Kennedy in Portland, Oregon. Here's what he had to say about the emotional power of type.
And the interesting thing I found about this generation is that even though they've never seen or utilized a typewriter, like a real typewriter, they associate Courier with this kind of literary, kind of like emotional reaction, which is very interesting. Like they've never even used a typewriter.
So true.
But they know, the same way with like a condensed font, like a Helvetica Insert or something like that. Like it has this very strong, powerful messaging. That same kind of thing. Where people just have this immediate reaction to type.
Wow, that's crazy, because I had this exact same thing with a student in a workshop that I did with Kingston University, and it was about custom type for branding. And I basically forced them to customize Helvetica Now with a specific value or function. And this guy picked the word, I think it was poetic. And how he chose to customize the typeface was to make it monospace, like a typewriter typeface. And the connection was like, whoa, I would never have thought of that for the word poetic, because it made him think of, writing poetry and I guess the romantic side of using a typewriter. So I agree with LaShawn.
I would like to see what Helvetica Now monospaced like a typewriter looks like too, just personally.
I still have it. I'll show it to you.
Bring it to LA. So let's go to one more anecdote. During Brand Talks, I also spoke to Justin Gignac. Is that correct, Marie?
That was beautiful.
So Justin is the co-founder of Working Not Working, which is a massive organization that is a collection of the best freelance designers in the world. So I think what's interesting about his clip is he talked to me about the challenge of choosing a typeface that represents yourself or, kind of evokes the project or the product that you're working on. So Justin is also really funny, and I really enjoyed speaking with him. So enjoy this clip. Can you tell me if you remember a time where you had an emotional reaction to type?
Yeah, designing my wedding invitation. My wife was so pissed at how long it was taking me to design our wedding invites. And she, it was 3 months before the wedding, 2 months before the wedding. She's getting really annoyed that it's taking so long. But I had to find the right typeface. And I had to come up with a look and come up with a typeface that really felt like it represented our relationship, which is hard. And it really means a lot. And it's important,
I've never related more to anything than I have to this clip, because let me tell you, I'm not even engaged. And yet I have so many sketches of what my wedding invitation is going to look like. Genuinely. To my poor boyfriend who's listening to this, forgive me. But it's just... It's so special. Hopefully it's once in your life, hopefully. And if you're somebody who cares about type, then you know that it can really, really shape people's feelings. So I'm not surprised that he was agonizing over the decision. Sorry for his wife, though. That must have been annoying.
Yeah. She's like, okay, can we get this done? He also described it. He said it was like this purple and orange letterpressed invitation, and it said prepare to get sweaty, and he was like, I bet you this is the only wedding invitation on letterpress in the world that says sweaty on it, which
oh my god,
it sounded really fun. They had a very dancing focused wedding.
That is so cool. Wait, I'm trying to picture it. So letterpress, invitation. Mm-hmm. You said purple and orange?
With like gold foil too, I think.
Oh, wow. And it said sweaty.
Yeah.
How do I get friends like this? How do I get invited
That's what I said.
to these weddings? Because I don't. I feel like I should.
So if you've been finding this conversation and these anecdotes interesting, next week we will be at Adobe Max in Los Angeles and continuing a lot of this Typography Matters research, having some fun activations at our booth. We have a speaking session, which Marie is presenting.
Yes, our whole team has been working so hard on our Max presence this year, so I hope everybody's excited. Our session is about mastering the art and science of font selection, which I really hope designers find useful. Obviously, there's a component of that which is using the research and how the emotional side of things can help you choose the right typeface. And then for our activation at the booth, we're really leaning into the emotions of type with, I don't know how to tease this without spoiling it. It's all about love. It's all about connection. That's all I'm going to say. Font connection. Remember those words.
And we will also be recording podcast audio like we did last year at Max. So we'll have a full booth this time, a little soundproofed booth. We'll be running around with mics. So if you'd like to be featured on the podcast, please come to the Monotype booth. I'm really excited to talk to you and meet you.
Same here. Can't wait, guys. Thanks, Cadby.
Thank you so much, Marie.
Thanks for listening. Keep an eye out for the new research at monotype.com/typography-matters. And if you're at Adobe Max next week, be sure to stop by our booth and have a chance to be featured on the podcast. I have to say, after watching this humble podcast grow, it's really exciting to me that we will have an actual podcast recording studio at Adobe Max. So I want to give a shout out to the team for that. As always, look for a link to our blog post in the show notes of this episode and check out monotype.com/podcast to read about all of our prior guests. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate and review this episode. And if you really like us, subscribe to the show and share us with your friends. Creative Characters is brought to you by Monotype, and it is produced by Christopher Olin, Mia Sullivan, and Marie Tabarez. We will be back with more episodes soon. Take care, everybody.